I was at the pharmacy when my granddaughter suddenly grabbed my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandpa, don't turn around. Just walk with me. I'll explain later." Her eyes were wide with a fear I'd never seen in my 16-year-old granddaughter before, the kind of raw terror that made every grandfather instinct in me snap to attention. I followed her without question, trusting the bond we'd built over years of shared secrets and Sunday afternoon talks. But the moment we stepped out of the pharmacy, something in the parking lot made us both freeze in our tracks, and I realized my life was about to change forever. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment telling me your location, because this story about family betrayal and an old man's fight for justice is just getting started. And you won't believe what my granddaughter had discovered. My name is Stanley Fairchild, and at 68, I've learned that life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. 3 years have passed since I buried my beloved Martha, and I've settled into what most folks would call a comfortable routine for a widowed farmer in Pine Valley, Maine. The Fairchild farm stretches across 240 acres of rolling hills and maple groves that have been in our family for 3 generations. The main farmhouse built by my father's hands sits on a small rise overlooking everything we've built and protected. I live alone in that big house, now managing the daily routines that keep this place running, checking livestock, at dawn handling the books for our cattle operation, maintaining equipment. Folks in town sometimes give me pitying looks, but I can still drive my pickup just fine, pay my bills on time, and haven't missed a Sunday service at Pine Valley Methodist in 43 years. Down our dirt road sits the guest cottage originally built for Martha's mother. These days it houses my son Pike, his wife Marley, and their 16-year-old daughter Raina. Pike's 42 now, and life hasn't been kind since his Boston tech startup collapsed 4 years ago. When he called that rainy April night voice, thick with shame, asking if they could come home just temporarily, "Dad, until we get back on our feet," what father could say no? That temporary arrangement has stretched into 4 years. Pike picks up odd jobs around town, carpentry here, harvest help there, but nothing steady. I watch him some mornings from my kitchen window, sitting on the cottage porch, with his coffee, staring at nothing with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marley keeps busy with her online jewelry business, bringing in a little income but not nearly enough. She's always been polite to me, respectful, but there's something in her eyes I can't quite read. Restlessness, maybe, or disappointment that their grand plans led back to a cottage on her father-in-law's farm. Raina's the bright spot in all this. That girl has Martha's spirit and my stubborn streak, which makes for quite a combination in a 16-year-old. She helps with farm chores when she's not buried in schoolwork, and we spend hours talking about everything from college plans to whether the Red Sox will ever win another World Series. She's got her grandmother's green eyes and the old Fairchild determination. The financial pressure weighs on all of us, though nobody talks about it directly. I see it in Pike's slumping shoulders and how Marley's smile doesn't reach her eyes anymore, in the careful way they discuss the future without making concrete plans. I've offered to help more than once, but Pike's pride runs deep, and he won't take what he calls charity from his own father. So we've fallen into our routines. I manage the farm and my monthly trips to town for supplies and prescriptions. Pike looks for work and helps where he can. Marley tends her business and keeps house. Raina goes to school and dreams of bigger things than Pine Valley can offer. We eat Sunday dinner together, celebrate holidays, and pretend everything is just fine. We're a family trying to hold together while the world shifts beneath our feet, each of us carrying burdens we don't quite know how to share. Pike carries the weight of his failures. Marley, the disappointment of dreams deferred, and I carry the knowledge that my son is drowning in shame while living in my shadow. But we're Fairchilds, and Fairchilds endure. That Tuesday afternoon, like every month for the past 3 years, I drove into Pine Valley for my prescription pickup. I was standing at the pharmacy counter reading warning labels on a bottle of supplements when everything changed. Pine Valley Pharmacy had been my monthly stop for 3 years running. The place felt as familiar as my own kitchen. Same faded floors, same antiseptic smell, same cheerful chatter from Betty Morrison, who'd been dispensing pills and local gossip for 20 years. "How's that granddaughter of yours doing, Stanley?" Betty asked, as she counted out my blood pressure medication. "Raina's got to be thinking about college soon." "Junior year," I replied. "Smart as a whip, that one. You tell her I said hello?" Betty sealed the bottle and slid it across the counter. "Same time next month." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, tucking the bottle into my jacket. That's when I felt it, a small hand gripping mine with unexpected urgency. Grandpa, don't turn around. Just walk with me. I'll explain later. I looked down to see Raina beside me, and my heart nearly stopped. Her usually bright eyes were wide with something I'd never seen before, raw, genuine fear. She was trying to smile for Betty's benefit, but her hand trembled against mine. Well, hello there, sweetheart, Betty called out. Didn't see you come in. Hi, Mrs. Morrison. Raina managed her voice steady despite the panic I could feel radiating from her. Just meeting Grandpa for a ride home. Every grandfather instinct I possessed snapped to attention. In 68 years, I'd learned to trust my gut, and right now it was screaming that whatever had put that fear in Raina's eyes was serious. See you next month, Betty, I said, keeping my voice light as Raina guided me toward the door. We moved slowly, casually, but I could feel the tension in my granddaughter's grip, the way she kept glancing around without seeming to look anywhere in particular. The October air hit us as we stepped outside, crisp and heavy with dying leaves. Pine Valley's main street stretched before us. Quiet in that mid-afternoon way, small towns perfect a few cars old. Frank Mueller walking his beagle, everything normal and peaceful. That's when Raina stopped so suddenly I nearly stumbled. There, she whispered, nodding toward the parking lot. The silver sedan, third row back. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. Pike's car sat there like a predator, positioned with a clear view of the pharmacy entrance. Through the windshield I could make out two figures. Pike's familiar slouch and Marley's rigid posture. They're watching us, Grandpa, Raina said, barely audible. They don't know I saw them, but they followed us here. They've been following you. The world tilted. My son, my own son, sitting in a parking lot, watching me like I was some kind of suspect. The prescription bottle in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, and Betty's cheerful questions took on a different meaning entirely. How long? I asked. I don't know. Maybe weeks. Maybe longer. Raina's hand found mine again, and this time I was the one who needed the anchor. Grandpa, I need to tell you something, but not here. Not where they might see us talking. The familiar streets of Pine Valley suddenly felt foreign, dangerous. My own family, the people I'd opened my home to supported through their hardest times, were surveilling me like criminals case a bank. The pharmacy where I'd picked up prescriptions for 3 years felt exposed, unsafe. Whatever Raina needed to tell me, whatever had put that terror in her eyes, it was big enough that she was willing to risk everything to warn me. 20 minutes later, we sat in my old Ford pickup at the edge of Millfield Park, surrounded by maple trees that had watched 3 generations of Fairchilds grow up, and now would witness the moment my world fell apart. Raina had chosen this spot carefully, hidden from Pine Valley's main road, tucked behind birch trees that provided natural cover. It was where she used to feed ducks with Martha, where we'd had countless grandfather-granddaughter talks. Now it felt like a war room. They can't see us here, Raina said, her voice still shaky. I checked the angles last week when I started planning this. She turned to face me, and I saw something in her 16-year-old eyes that no child should carry the weight of terrible knowledge. Planning what, sweetheart? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Grandpa, I've been recording them. Mom and Dad, I know it's wrong, but I heard things. Things about you. My chest tightened. What kind of things? 2 weeks ago I couldn't sleep. I came downstairs for milk and heard voices in Dad's study. The door was cracked and they were talking about you. She was talking fast now, words tumbling over each other. At first I thought maybe they were just worried about your health. But then Mom mentioned timing, about making sure everything was in place before Aunt Serafina came for Thanksgiving. The mention of my daughter's name sent a chill through me. What did Serafina have to do with whatever they were planning? So I started paying attention. Really paying attention. They have these conversations every few days, always when they think I'm asleep. Always about you, about the farm, about money. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Money. The farm is worth a lot more than anyone talks about, isn't it? Her green eyes. Martha's eyes searched my face. There's something about a development project about land values going up. Smart girl. Too smart for her own good. I'd tried to keep the family finances private, but Raina had always been observant. The infrastructure project coming to Pine Valley would make our land valuable more than Pike or Marley knew I knew. I set up a recording app, she said quietly. I know it was wrong, but Grandpa, I was scared. The way they talk about you like you weren't really there anymore, like you were already gone. The weight of her words settled over the truck cab. My own son and daughter-in-law discussing me like an obstacle to be removed. The people I'd welcomed into my home were plotting something that required my absence. I've got 3 different conversations recorded, Raina said, thumb hovering over her phone screen. But this one is the worst. This is where they talk about the plan. She looked up at me with tears threatening to spill. Grandpa, I need you to hear this. But it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt really bad. I reached over and took her free hand in mine. At 68, I thought I'd heard everything life could throw at me. I'd buried parents, lost friends, said goodbye to Martha. But sitting in that truck, looking at my granddaughter's tear-filled eyes, I realized I wasn't prepared for what came next. The girl who still believed the best in everyone was about to shatter that belief forever. The granddaughter who'd never had to choose between her parents and her grandfather was being forced to make that choice. And the father in me knew that whatever I was about to hear would change our family forever. Play it, Lou, I said. She pressed play, and my son's voice filled the truck cabin, a voice I'd trusted for 42 years, now plotting my downfall. The competency evaluation won't work if he's deemed mentally sound. Pike's voice crackled through the speaker. Dr. Blackstone said the assessment has to show cognitive decline for the transfer to be legally binding. My hands gripped the steering wheel. Dr. Minerva Blackstone, a name I didn't recognize, but apparently someone already brought into my son's scheme. Marley's response came sharp and impatient. Then we need documentation, missed appointments, confusion about dates, anything that builds the pattern. Your sister won't question us if we have medical evidence. Serafina will ask questions. Pike's voice carried guilt I'd never heard before. She's not stupid, Marley. If Dad suddenly seems incompetent, Serafina is in Seattle. Marley cut him off cold as winter. By the time she figures out what's happening, the property will already be transferred into our trust. He signed that power of attorney 3 years ago. He doesn't even remember doing it. Power of attorney, I'd never signed such a document. Had I? The months after Martha's death were a blur of grief and paperwork. Documents Pike had been so helpful with bringing them to the house, explaining what needed my signature. Are you sure he doesn't remember? Pike asked. And I heard what might have been hope that his father wasn't as far gone as they needed me to be. He was emotionally compromised when he signed it. Marley replied matter-of-factly. Dr. Blackstone witnessed it. She'll testify he was competent then, and she'll testify he's declining now. Beside me, Raina cried silently, watching her grandfather's world crumble. I wanted to comfort her, but I was drowning in the realization that my family had been planning this for years. The farm's really worth that much. Pike's voice again. 7 to 9 million according to the development assessment, Marley said. The infrastructure project breaks ground next spring. Prime commercial corridor. We'd be fools not to capitalize on it. $7 to $9 million. No wonder they were willing to have me declared incompetent. That money could solve Pike's problems and set them up for life. All it required was stealing 3 generations of Fairchild legacy. I still don't feel right about this, Pike said, and for a moment I heard my son the boy I'd taught to fish. He's my father Marley. He took us in when we had nowhere else to go. And now he's an old man sitting on a fortune he'll never live to enjoy. Marley's voice turned razor sharp. We're being practical. He'll be better off in a care facility with professional supervision. But the evaluation will show exactly what it needs to show. Dr. Blackstone understands the situation. A few missed appointments, some confusion about medications, maybe a kitchen fire or a fall. Nothing dramatic, just a pattern of decline any court would accept. They were going to manufacture evidence of my incompetence, create incidents, manipulate situations, build a case that would strip away everything I'd worked for. And they'd been planning it for months, maybe years. Raina paused the recording. There's more, she whispered, about Aunt Serafina, about keeping her away until it's too late. I sat in that truck surrounded by October light, filtering through maple leaves, and felt something die inside me. Not just trust, something deeper. The belief that family meant something. The faith that the people you love won't sell you out for money. Grandpa, Raina's voice seemed far away. Are you okay? I looked at my granddaughter, this brave girl who'd risked everything to warn me, and realized she was the only family I could trust. At 16, she'd shown more integrity than my 42-year-old son. There's more, I asked, my voice hoarse. She nodded, fresh tears spilling. Grandpa, I found papers too. That evening, after I'd driven Raina home with promises to act normal, I sat alone in my farmhouse and tried to make sense of a world where my own son could betray me so completely. The house felt different now, larger, emptier, full of shadows that hadn't been there that morning. I moved through rooms that had sheltered 3 generations of Fairchilds, wondering how many conversations had taken place here without my knowledge. I started in Martha's old desk, methodically going through drawers I hadn't touched since she passed. Insurance policies, tax, records, medical bills, all the paper trail of a life lived and lost. The power of attorney had to be somewhere. If I'd really signed it 3 years ago when Pike had been so helpful with the overwhelming paperwork, then there would be copies. I remembered those days in fragments. Pike arriving with manila folders and patient explanations, his gentle voice saying, "Just a formality, Dad, and this will help protect the farm." I'd signed whatever he put in front of me, trusting my son while I drowned in grief. Had I been that vulnerable, that easily manipulated? The cedar chest in the bedroom held Martha's most precious papers. At the bottom, in an envelope marked, "Legal documents. Do not discard. I found it." The durable power of attorney was exactly as described on that recording. My signature, shaky but recognizable, dated 3 weeks after Martha's funeral. The document gave Pike complete authority over my financial and medical decisions in the event of incapacity. And there in the witness section, Dr. Minerva Blackstone. I stared at that name until the letters blurred. A doctor I'd never met had witnessed the most important legal document of my life. How had Pike arranged for a medical professional to be present for what he'd called a simple family precaution? Unless it hadn't been simple at all. Unless this had been planned from the beginning. Back at Martha's desk, I found something worse. Correspondence about the farm. Letters from the county about the infrastructure project, development assessments, property valuations. All addressed to Pike Fairchild. Attorney in fact for Stanley Fairchild. He'd been receiving official communications about my property for months, maybe years, making decisions, getting information, positioning himself to benefit from developments I knew nothing about. The power of attorney hadn't just given him authority over my future, it had given him control over my present. I was still sitting there when I noticed something chilling. The desk drawer wasn't quite closed properly. I always close drawers completely. It's a habit from years of farm work. Someone had been through these papers recently. Someone other than me. The phone rang sharp in the quiet house. Pike's name flashed on the caller ID. "Hi, Dad." His voice was warm, concerned, exactly the tone he'd used when helping me through grief. "Just calling to check on you. How was your trip to the pharmacy today?" I stared at the power of attorney document, at Dr. Blackstone's signature, at the evidence that my son had been planning this betrayal for years. "Fine," I managed. "Everything's fine." "Good. Hey, I meant to mention Dr. Morrison's office called about scheduling that wellness checkup we discussed. Just routine stuff for someone your age. Would next Tuesday work?" We'd never discussed any wellness checkup, and I'd never heard of Dr. Morrison. "Sure," I said, playing along. "What time?" 10 in the morning. I'll pick you up at 9:30. Love you, Dad." "Love you too," I whispered and hung up. I sat in that empty house, holding proof of my son's betrayal, and realized the recording was just the beginning. This conspiracy was deeper, more carefully planned than I had imagined. They had doctors lined up, legal documents in place, and a timeline that was already in motion. Pike wasn't just planning to steal my farm, he was planning to erase me entirely, piece by piece, until I was nothing but a signature on papers I didn't understand. And I was completely alone. The next morning, I knew I needed help, the kind that couldn't be found in Pine Valley, where everyone knew everyone, and secrets traveled faster than Sunday gossip. I drove to the Pine Valley Library, where my old friend Atticus Blackwell volunteered, after retiring from 30 years of teaching high school English. At 73, Atticus still had the sharp eyes and sharper mind that had made him Pine Valley's most respected teacher. "Stanley?" He looked up from sorting books, his face creasing into a smile. "Don't tell me you're finally ready for war and peace. I need to talk Atticus, privately." Something in my tone made him set down his work immediately. He gestured toward his small office behind the stacks. I told him everything. The recording, the power of attorney, the mysterious doctors, Pike's suspicious behavior. With each revelation, Atticus's expression grew darker. "That son of a bitch?" he said finally, and I'd never heard Atticus swear. "Stanley, this is elder financial abuse. It's a felony. I need a lawyer, but not from around here. Someone Pike doesn't know." Atticus was already at his computer. "My nephew practices in Boston. Let me get you a referral." His fingers moved across the keyboard. "Here's Sarah Chen, elder law specialist in Portland. Excellent reputation. Portland's 2 hours away. Pike will notice if I'm gone that long. Not if you're with me, Atticus said without hesitation. We'll say we're visiting my old college roommate in Bangor. I've been meaning to make that trip anyway. I felt the first breath of relief I'd taken since hearing that recording. You'd do that, Stanley? You think I wouldn't help save your farm? His eyes held fierce protectiveness. You've been there for this community for decades. We made the appointment for that afternoon, Atticus, spinning a convincing story when he called his wife. As we prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Stanley, there's something else. Last week Pike stopped by here. Asked if I'd noticed any changes in you lately, whether you seemed confused or forgetful. Said he was concerned about your mental state. The words hit like a physical blow. He's been laying groundwork, building a narrative, Atticus confirmed grimly, making sure people would remember him expressing concern about your competency. Very methodical. We walked toward his Subaru, and I realized how carefully Pike had orchestrated this betrayal. Not just legal documents and medical evaluations, but social preparation planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity in minds of people who'd known me for decades. How long has this been going on? I asked as Atticus started the engine. Longer than you want to know, he replied. But you're fighting back now. That counts for something. As we drove through Pine Valley's familiar streets toward the Portland Highway, I caught a glimpse of Pike's silver sedan parked outside Millfield's general store. For a moment, our eyes met through the windshields. My son and me separated by 30 yards, and a gulf of betrayal that felt infinite. Pike raised his hand in what looked like a friendly wave, but I saw something else in his expression. Calculation. He was noting who I was with, where I was going, adding this information to whatever file he was building on his father's declining mental state. He's watching, I told Atticus. Let him watch, Atticus replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter. We're just two old friends going for a drive. But as Pine Valley disappeared in the rearview mirror, I knew Pike would be making calls, checking stories, trying to figure out what his father was really up to. The game had begun, and my son had no idea I was finally playing to win. 2 hours later, I sat across from attorney Victoria Hartwell, in her Portland office, surrounded by law books, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't too late. Victoria was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with intelligent dark eyes and focused intensity. Her office walls displayed Harvard law certificates and photos of elderly clients outside courthouses, people who'd fought and won. Mr. Fairchild, she said after reviewing my documents, this is textbook elder financial abuse. The good news is that a power of attorney can be revoked at any time as long as you're mentally competent. The bad news is that if they're planning a competency evaluation, we need to act fast. She spread my financial records across her desk. Bank statements showing regular payments, balanced accounts, investment decisions proving I was managing my affairs competently. This is excellent evidence. You're clearly handling your finances, making sound decisions, living independently. The appointment with Dr. Morrison is Tuesday, I said. 4 days from now. Then we file the revocation before then, Victoria replied decisively. I can draft documents this afternoon. Once filed with the county clerk and served on your son, he has no legal authority to arrange medical appointments on your behalf. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. We'll also send certified mail copies to this Dr. Blackstone and anyone else listed in the original document. The moment they receive this, your son's power of attorney becomes null and void. What about the evaluation? Won't it look suspicious if I don't show up? Victoria leaned back. Mr. Fairchild, let me be blunt. Your son and daughter-in-law are committing financial elder abuse. They've accessed your property communications without permission, they're planning fraudulent medical testimony, and they're trying to steal land worth millions. Looking suspicious to them should be the least of your concerns. She was right, but decades of family peacekeeping made it hard to accept. What if this destroys my relationship with my son? What if doing nothing destroys your entire life? After a moment, Victoria's expression softened. I know this is hard. Family betrayal always is. But you have rights, Mr. Fairchild. You have agency, and you have the law on your side. We spent 2 hours drafting documents. Victoria was thorough, explaining each section. The revocation was clear. Pike Fairchild no longer had any authority over my medical, financial, or personal decisions. One more thing, Victoria said as we finished. Change your locks and update your will. If your son has been in your house without permission, he may have copied your keys. The thought of Pike searching through my home, my memories of Martha, made my stomach turn. I'll call a locksmith tomorrow. Good, and document everything from now on. Keep a journal of any contact with your son or daughter-in-law. If they show up, note the date and time. If they call, write down what was said. If this escalates to court, and it might, that documentation will be invaluable. Atticus was waiting in reception, reading with the patience of a man who'd spent decades grading papers. He looked up as I emerged. How did it go? We're fighting back, I said, and for the first time in days I felt some control over my life. The drive back to Pine Valley passed in comfortable silence. As we pulled into my driveway, Atticus gripped my shoulder. You did the right thing, Stanley. Whatever happens next, you stood up for yourself. Inside my house, I looked around with new eyes. Tomorrow I'd change the locks. Tonight, I'd start documenting everything. For the first time since hearing that recording, I felt like I had weapons in this fight. The phone rang with an unknown number, but somehow I knew exactly who it would be. I was barely through my front door when the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but somehow I knew exactly who it would be. Hello, Mr. Fairchild. The voice was male, older, cultured, the kind of educated tone that belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. I hope you're enjoying your brief victory. Who is this? Someone who's invested considerable time and money into a certain property transaction. My name is Aldrich Ravencroft, and I must say you've proven more resourceful than anticipated. The name meant nothing to me, but the confidence in his voice, the casual way he dismissed my legal action as a brief victory, sent ice through my veins. Your son and daughter-in-law were supposed to be simple intermediaries. Aldrich continued his tone, remaining pleasant, almost amused. But they've proven disappointingly incompetent. I had hoped this matter could be resolved quietly without involving attorneys and county clerks. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. That was rather the point. I could hear the smile in his voice. Let me be clear, Mr. Fairchild. You have until Monday to withdraw your criminal complaints, revoke those restraining orders, and sign revised trust documents transferring the property. In exchange, your granddaughter's future remains secure. The charges against your son disappear, and you receive a comfortable retirement fund, say $200,000. My blood ran cold. He knew about Raina. Somehow this stranger knew about my family, my legal actions, everything. The infrastructure development, the property valuation, the legal framework. All of it requires expertise and capital. Aldrich explained with the patience of a teacher addressing a slow student. Your son needed money. I needed access to a very valuable piece of land. It should have been a simple transaction. Except the land isn't yours to sell. It's a technicality that was being addressed. But now you've complicated matters with lawyers and police. Very inconvenient. His tone hardened slightly. The Fairchild Farm sits directly in the path of a $7.2 million infrastructure project, Mr. Fairchild. Commercial development, transportation corridors, federal contracts. Do you have any idea how many people stand to benefit from that project? 7.2 million, even more than Pike and Marley had discussed on that recording. And if I refuse your generous offer, then you'll discover that some battles are too big for small-town lawyers and county sheriffs. The pleasant mask was slipping now. Medical records can be surprisingly detailed, Mr. Fairchild. A brief psychiatric hospitalization 15 years ago, depression, anxiety, possible early-onset dementia. All documented by respected physicians who will testify under oath. I was never hospitalized for psychiatric reasons. Are you certain memory is such a fragile thing, especially at your age? And medical records can be surprisingly comprehensive or surprisingly fabricated depending on what one needs. The threat was crystal clear. He could manufacture evidence, create a medical history that would destroy my credibility in any court. This wasn't just about my farm anymore. This was about a conspiracy involving doctors, lawyers, possibly government officials, people with the power to rewrite reality itself. You have influential friends, I said. I have necessary associates. Senators who approved route changes, contractors who won development bids, DOT officials who expedited environmental reviews. This project has been in planning for 3 years, Mr. Fairchild. Your little farm was always going to be acquired. The only question was whether you'd be compensated or simply removed. The scope of it staggered me. This wasn't a family betrayal. It was a coordinated effort involving multiple levels of government and private industry. Pike and Marley weren't masterminds. They were pawns in a game I was only beginning to understand. You're threatening my family. I'm offering you a choice. Sign over the property and everyone gets what they want. Refuse and I'll destroy not just you, but anyone who stands with you. Your daughter in Seattle? Your granddaughter, that librarian friend who drove you to Portland today? Yes, Mr. Fairchild, I know about your little trip. There are no secrets in small towns. The line went dead, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, and the terrible realization that I wasn't just fighting my son's greed anymore. I was up against people with unlimited resources, political connections, and the willingness to destroy anyone who got in their way. With shaking hands, I dialed the one person I knew who could match Aldrich Ravencroft's legal threats with expertise of her own. With shaking hands, I dialed the one person I knew who could match Aldrich Ravencroft's legal threats with expertise of her own. Dad, is everything okay? Seraphina's voice was tinged with surprise. Your number came through. Usually when you call it goes straight to Pike's phone. The words hit like a physical blow. What do you mean? The call forwarding service he set up after Mom died. He said you kept forgetting to charge your phone, so he arranged for your calls to route through him. Her voice sharpened with trial lawyer instincts. Dad, what's going on? I told her everything. The recording, the power of attorney, the Doctor's Pike's surveillance, and finally, Aldrich Ravencroft's threats. With each revelation, I could hear my daughter processing the implications. That son of a bitch, she said when I finished, and I'd rarely heard Seraphina swear. Dad, this is a federal conspiracy. Infrastructure fraud, elder abuse, possibly RICO violations. Aldrich said he has senators involved, DOT officials. Then we're dealing with public corruption, too. Her voice shifted into crisp professional tone. This is bigger than Pike's greed. You've stumbled into something that could bring down politicians and cost people millions in contracts. He threatened you, and Raina. Said he knew about everyone helping me. Let him threaten. I've been dealing with powerful men who think they can intimidate women for 20 years. There was steel in her voice. Dad, I'm booking the next flight to Portland. Don't sign anything, don't meet with anyone, don't even talk to Pike until I get there. I could hear her typing rapidly. There's a red-eye that gets into Portland at 6 a.m. I'll rent a car and be at the farm by 8. Seraphina, I'm scared. Not for me, but for you and Raina. Dad, stop. Her voice was gentle but firm. You raised me to fight for what's right. You taught me that standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them. Did you think I'd abandon you now? Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to sit down. For 3 days I'd felt like I was drowning. Now my daughter, brilliant, fierce Seraphina, was coming home. What's our strategy? First we document everything. Every threat, every call, every piece of evidence. Then we go offensive. If Aldrich Ravencroft thinks he can steal from my father and threaten my family, he's about to learn what happens when you mess with a trial lawyer's family. I could hear the confidence that had built her successful practice. I have contacts at the FBI's white-collar crime unit relationships with federal prosecutors' resources that small-town conspirators can't match. What about Pike? There was a long pause. Pike made his choice when he decided to betray his own father. If he's genuinely remorseful, if he's willing to testify against the people who used him, maybe we can help him. But Dad, my priority is protecting you and Raina. As we coordinated logistics, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Martha died, the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. Dad, Seraphina said as we prepared to hang up, promise me something. Don't do anything heroic until I get there. These people are dangerous and desperate. Stay home, stay safe, and let me handle the legal warfare. I promise. Good. And Dad, we're going to win this. Aldrich Ravencroft has no idea what he's up against. 18 hours later, my daughter walked through my front door like a force of nature briefcase in one hand and a look of pure determination on her face. 18 hours later, my daughter walked through my front door like a force of nature briefcase in one hand and a look of pure determination on her face. Dad. Seraphina dropped her briefcase and wrapped me in a hug that reminded me she was still my little girl, despite the power suits and courtroom victories. At 44, she had Martha's fierce intelligence, and my stubborn streak, a combination that had made her one of Seattle's most formidable trial attorneys. I'm so sorry, I whispered into her shoulder. I should have called you sooner. You called when you needed to, she said, pulling back to study my face with the same intensity she'd once brought to studying for the bar exam. And now we're going to make them regret ever targeting our family. She opened her briefcase on the kitchen table, pulling out legal pads, recording equipment, and a laptop that looked more advanced than anything Pike had ever owned. Show me everything. The power of attorney, The recordings. Any documentation you have about this Aldrich character. For the next hour, I laid out the evidence like pieces of a puzzle. Serafina listened without interruption, occasionally making notes or asking for clarification. Her expression grew darker with each revelation, but her focus never wavered. "This is sophisticated," she said, finally studying the power of attorney document. "The timing, the witness, signatures, the legal language, someone with serious resources planned this years in advance." Aldrich said the infrastructure project has been in development for 3 years, which means they've been positioning to acquire your property since before Pike even moved back home. Serafina pulled up something on her laptop. "I ran a preliminary search on Aldrich Ravencroft during my layover. He's connected to at least 4 major development projects across New England, all involving questionable land acquisitions." She turned the screen toward me, showing a newspaper article about a similar case in Vermont. "Elderly farmer, mysterious power of attorney competency, evaluation family member as intermediary. Same pattern, different state." The scope of it staggered me. How many families has he done this to? That's what we're going to find out. But first, we need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here in Maine. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. If this is a pattern of elder abuse across state lines, it becomes federal jurisdiction." "Won't that take time?" Aldrich gave me until Monday. Serafina's smile was sharp as a blade. "Dad Aldrich Ravencroft made a critical error when he threatened a federal prosecutor's father. My ex-boyfriend runs the white-collar crime division in Boston. He owes me several favors." She was already dialing, but paused when she heard footsteps on the porch. Through the window, I saw Raina approaching her school backpack, slung over her shoulder. "I asked her to come over after school," Serafina said. "We need her testimony about the recordings, and I want to make sure she's protected if this escalates." Raina entered quietly, her eyes wide at seeing her aunt in full lawyer mode. The kitchen table looked like a war room, covered with documents and legal pads. "Aunt Serafina," she said softly, "I'm so glad you're here. Come sit down, sweetheart. We need to go over everything you heard, everything you recorded. Every detail could be important." As Raina settled into her chair, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Martha died, the strength that comes from families standing together. My daughter with her legal expertise, my granddaughter with her courage and evidence we were no longer victims of Aldrich's conspiracy. "There's something else," Raina said quietly, pulling out her phone. "Something I haven't told anyone yet about Mom and that man." Serafina and I exchanged glances. "What kind of something?" Serafina asked gently. "I have pictures from when I followed them to that restaurant in Bangor. I was going to show Grandpa, but then everything happened so fast with the recordings and the lawyers." She scrolled through her phone with trembling fingers. "Aunt Serafina, I don't think this is just about money anymore." She turned the phone toward us, and I felt my world shift again. The photo showed Marley and Aldrich Ravencroft at an intimate dinner table. But it wasn't their body language that made my blood run cold. It was the way they were looking at each other. "There's something else I haven't told you about Mom and that man," Raina whispered. What Raina showed us next changed everything we thought we knew about Marley's motivations. The photo on her phone was crystal clear. Marley and Aldrich Ravencroft at an intimate corner table in an upscale restaurant. It wasn't just their proximity that made my stomach drop. It was the way Aldrich's hand covered hers, the way she leaned into him, the unmistakable intimacy between two people who were far more than business partners. "When was this taken?" Serafina asked, immediately focusing on timeline and evidence. 3 weeks ago," Raina said quietly. "I followed Mom to Bangor. She said she was meeting a jewelry client, but something felt off. She was dressed too nice, too nervous." She swiped to the next photo, Aldrich kissing Marley's hand as they prepared to leave. Then another showing them walking to separate cars after an intimate goodbye. "How long have you suspected?" I asked. "Months, maybe longer. Mom's been different. Happier but secretive. New clothes, expensive perfume, private phone calls." Then I heard that first recording. Serafina was taking rapid notes. "These photos establish timeline. Raina, do you have recordings that reference this relationship directly?" "I have one where she's talking to him on the phone." Raina pulled up an audio file. "Listen." Marley's voice filled the kitchen, softer and more intimate than I'd ever heard. "I can't keep lying to him much longer. Pike's getting suspicious about the meetings, and Stanley's not as oblivious as we thought. Maybe we should accelerate the timeline." Aldrich's cultured voice responded warmer and personal. "Patience, darling. A few more months, and we'll have everything we wanted. The property, the development contracts, and each other. Pike will never have to know how long this has been going on. But what if he finds out? What if he realizes I never loved him? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Keep playing the devoted wife. Keep him focused on his father's supposed incompetence. Once the competency evaluation is complete and the property transfer goes through, none of it will matter. The recording ended, leaving us in stunned silence. I looked at my granddaughter, this brave 16-year-old, carrying the weight of her mother's betrayal, and felt my heart break for her. Pike doesn't know, I said finally. Pike's been played just as much as you have, Serafina confirmed. Marley married him for access to the property. She's been working with Aldrich from the beginning, using Pike's financial desperation to manipulate him into betraying you. The scope of deception staggered me. My son wasn't the mastermind. He was another victim manipulated by a wife who'd never loved him, and a conspiracy that had targeted our family for years. This changes our entire strategy, Serafina said, pacing like she did when working through complex cases. We're not just dealing with elder financial abuse. We have adultery, conspiracy to commit fraud, emotional manipulation, and a long-term con game. What does this mean for Pike? It means your son might be redeemable. If we can prove he was manipulated, if we can show that Marley and Aldrich used his love and shame to control him, then Pike becomes a victim too. And victims can become witnesses. Raina looked up from her phone. There's more. I have photos from other meetings going back almost a year, and I think Mom's been stealing from Dad too, moving money into accounts he doesn't know about. She showed us screenshots of bank statements, evidence of financial manipulation that went deeper than anyone realized. They've been bleeding Pike dry while promising him a fortune, Serafina said grimly. Classic manipulation: create the problem, then offer the solution. Make him desperate enough to betray his own father. I thought about my son carrying the weight of his failures, believing his wife supported him while she systematically destroyed him. The Pike I'd raised the boy with a good heart was still there beneath the shame and manipulation. Can we save him? I asked. We can try, but first we destroy the people who've been using him. Serafina gathered the photos and recordings with methodical precision. We're going to give Aldrich and Marley exactly what they think they want: a meeting where you surrender. But instead of giving up, we're going to expose everything. The affair, the manipulation, the conspiracy. Now we set the trap, she said, her smile sharp as broken glass. 2 days later, I sat in a Portland law office conference room, waiting for the people who had tried to steal my life to walk into our carefully planned ambush. The conference room at Morrison & Associates felt like a stage set for the final act. Serafina sat beside me in her charcoal suit, every inch the professional attorney. Her briefcase contained what appeared to be surrender documents, but was actually a comprehensive case file. Hidden in her jacket was a recording device that would capture every word. Remember, she whispered as footsteps approached, you're a defeated old man who just wants this nightmare to end. Let them get comfortable. Pike entered first, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shoulders slumped with guilt and shame, and when his eyes met mine, I saw genuine remorse. Behind him came Marley, perfectly styled, in a navy dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She looked confident, triumphant, like a woman minutes away from claiming her prize. Aldrich Ravencroft entered last. Distinguished silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. At 60-something, he moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Stanley, Pike said, quietly taking a seat across from me. I'm sorry it's come to this. Are you... The word slipped out, and I saw Pike flinch. Gentlemen, ladies, Aldrich said, smoothly settling into his chair like he owned the room. Let's keep this civil. We're here to resolve a misunderstanding, not relitigate old grievances. Marley placed a manicured hand on Pike's arm, a gesture that might have looked supportive to anyone who didn't know about her affair. Pike's been under tremendous stress. We all want what's best for Stanley. Serafina pulled out what looked like legal documents. My father is prepared to withdraw his complaints and accept a reasonable settlement. He just wants to live out his remaining years in peace. Sensible, Aldrich said, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I've always believed reasonable people can reach reasonable agreements. He leaned back, already savoring victory. The terms are quite generous. Stanley retains a life estate in the farmhouse, receives a comfortable monthly stipend, and the family avoids unpleasant legal entanglements. Everyone wins. Pike shifted uncomfortably. The monthly amount, is it enough for him to maintain his independence? Your father will be very comfortable, Aldrich assured him, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. Though at his age, independence is a relative concept anyway. I watched my son's face as implications sank in. Pike might have been desperate and manipulated, but he wasn't stupid. He was beginning to understand that Aldrich's definition of comfortable might not match his own. The important thing, Marley said quickly, is that this whole unfortunate situation can be resolved quietly. No more lawyers, no more investigations, no more family drama. Indeed, Aldrich agreed, confidence growing. Your son was easier to manipulate than I expected Stanley. A few financial pressures, some strategic guidance from his lovely wife, and he was quite willing to see reason about your declining capabilities. The words hung in the air like a confession, and I saw Pike's face go white. For the first time, my son was hearing the truth about how he'd been used, how his desperation had been weaponized against his own father, how his love for his wife had been exploited to serve another man's greed. Aldrich's smile widened as he watched Pike's realization dawn. It's amazing what people will do when they think they have no other choice. Your son genuinely believed he was helping you, helping his family. The guilt was almost too easy to manipulate. That's when Serafina played the card we'd been holding and everything exploded. Before we discuss any settlement, Serafina said, calmly opening her laptop, I think everyone should see what we've discovered about the true nature of this conspiracy. The first photo filled her screen, Marley and Aldrich, at that intimate restaurant table, his hand covering hers, their faces close in unmistakable intimacy. She turned the laptop so everyone could see. Pike's face went from confusion to shock to devastation in heartbeats. What is this? This was taken 3 weeks ago in Bangor, Serafina said steadily. There are more. She clicked to the next image, Aldrich kissing Marley's hand as they prepared to leave. Then another, showing them in an intimate goodbye embrace. Marley, Pike's voice cracked. What is this? What are these pictures? Marley's confident mask shattered completely. The poised, supportive wife disappeared, replaced by a woman whose lies were crumbling. Pike, I can explain. Can you? Aldrich's voice cut through her, stammering, cold as ice. Because I'm curious to hear how you plan to explain 18 months of deception. Pike turned to stare at the man he'd trusted. 18 months. Your wife has been my partner in more ways than one, Aldrich said with casual cruelty. Though I must say she played the devoted spouse role admirably. Had you completely fooled, didn't she? You used her, Pike whispered, pieces clicking together. You used my wife to manipulate me. I used a woman who was more than willing to be used, Aldrich replied smoothly. Marley approached me, actually. Seems she'd grown tired of being married to a failure. The words hit Pike like physical blows. He turned to his wife, searching her face for some sign this was a mistake. Marley, tell me this isn't true. What did you expect? Marley's voice was sharp, now all pretense gone. You lost everything, Pike. Your business, your money, your self-respect. We were living in your father's guest house like charity cases while you wallowed in failure. So you decided to steal from my father. I decided to find someone who could actually provide for me, Marley shot back. Someone who wasn't content to live off Daddy's charity forever. Pike's face crumpled. How long have you been planning this? Since I met Aldrich at that development conference in Boston, Marley said without remorse. He told me about the infrastructure project, how valuable your father's land would become. Get close to you, get access to the property, arrange the transfer. I never expected you to be so pathetically grateful for attention. You never loved me. Love. Marley laughed bitterly. Pike, you were a means to an end. A useful fool who happened to have the right last name and access to the right property. Did you really think someone like me would choose someone like you for any other reason? Pike's composure shattered. Dad, he turned to me, tears streaming. I'm so sorry. I thought she loved me. I thought I was protecting our future. But there was no family, was there? There was never any family. He looked back at Marley with something approaching hatred. You made me betray my own father. You made me into a monster, and I was too stupid to see it. You made yourself into a monster, Marley replied coldly. I just gave you the opportunity. Enough, Serafina said, cutting through the carnage. Pike, you weren't the architect, you were another victim. They used your love, your desperation, your shame to manipulate you. She pulled out more documents. We have evidence of financial manipulation going back 2 years. Marley's been systematically draining your accounts, creating the very pressure that drove you to desperation. She manufactured the crisis that made you vulnerable. Pike stared at the papers. You created my problems so you could solve them. Classic manipulation, Serafina confirmed. Create the wound, then offer the bandage. Aldrich had been watching with amusement, but now looked annoyed. This is all very touching, but ultimately irrelevant. Pike signed the documents. Stanley signed the power of attorney. Everything we've done is perfectly legal. Actually, it's not, Serafina said and smiled. Because fraud vitiates consent, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse is a federal crime. And Aldrich, you just confessed to all of it on tape. As handcuffs clicked around Aldrich's wrists, I watched my son collapse into his chair, finally free from the web of lies that had trapped us all. Aldrich Ravencroft, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, fraud, and coercion, the lead detective announced. Behind him, officers moved toward Marley, who had gone pale as reality sank in. This is ridiculous, she protested, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, adultery, in furtherance of criminal enterprise and financial exploitation of an elderly person. Serafina was already coordinating with federal prosecutors. We also have evidence of Dr. Minerva Blackstone's involvement in falsifying medical evaluations. She's been providing fraudulent competency assessments across New England. Pike sat watching his wife being read her rights. When Marley looked at him one last time, there was no love in her eyes. No regret, only cold calculation about minimizing her legal exposure. Pike, the detective said gently, we understand you may have been manipulated. If you're willing to cooperate to testify about how you were coerced, that will be taken into account. My son looked up at me, eyes red with tears and shame. Dad, I'll tell them everything. Every conversation, every document, every lie they made me believe. I know I can never undo what I did, but maybe I can help make sure they can't do this to anyone else. I reached across the table and took his hand, the first time I'd touched my son, without anger since this began. Pike, you were a victim too. It's going to take time to heal, but we're family. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Aldrich's conspiracy had targeted multiple families across 3 states, using the same pattern of manipulation and fraudulent evaluations. Dr. Blackstone's license was suspended, and investigators found evidence of at least 12 other cases where elderly property owners had been systematically defrauded. Within a week, I had full custody of Raina. The court recognized that Marley's criminal activities made her unfit, and Pike, while facing probation and community service, was deemed a victim of manipulation rather than a criminal mastermind. Grandpa, Raina said one evening as we sat on the farmhouse porch, are you going to be able to forgive Dad? Really forgive him? I considered carefully. Pike had spent weeks since his arrest making genuine amends, working with prosecutors, helping other victims, attending counseling to understand his manipulation. But more than that, I'd seen something I hadn't witnessed in years. Humility, genuine remorse, and determination to rebuild himself. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, I told her, and it's not pretending nothing happened. But your father was lost, Raina. He made terrible choices, but he was being manipulated by people who knew exactly how to exploit his weaknesses. Do you think he really loves me, or was that manipulation too? Oh, sweetheart, I pulled her close. Your father's love for you was the one real thing in all of this. That's why Marley could use it against him. Evil people are very good at taking the best parts of us, our love, our loyalty, our desire to protect family, and twisting those good impulses into weapons. 3 months later, as the first snow of winter dusted the fields of Fairchild Farm, I sat by my fireplace watching my son teach his daughter how to play chess, a game that requires thinking several moves ahead, something he was finally learning to do. The legal aftermath had played out as Serafina predicted. Aldrich Ravencroft received 15 years in federal prison for elder abuse, conspiracy with additional charges in Vermont and New Hampshire for similar schemes. Marley got 8 years for fraud, her sentence barely reduced despite Pike's cooperation. Dr. Minerva Blackstone lost her medical license permanently and faced criminal charges for falsifying evaluations across a network that had targeted 23 families. Pike received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service, helping other elder abuse victims. The court recognized his manipulation but held him accountable. More importantly, Pike understood the difference. I can't blame everything on Marley, he'd told me while we repaired fence damaged by winter storms. She used my weaknesses, but those weaknesses were mine. The pride that kept me from asking for help, the shame that made me vulnerable, those were my failures. It was self-awareness I hadn't seen from my son in years. The Pike who'd moved back 4 years ago had been running from failure. This Pike was facing it head-on, building something better from the wreckage. Raina flourished under my care. Discovering your mother never loved your father, that she'd used your family as pawns in a criminal conspiracy, those wounds take time to heal. But Raina was resilient, like her great-grandmother Martha, and she had support from a family finally honest with each other. Serafina visited every few weeks, taking leave from her Seattle firm to help coordinate the federal investigation. More than that, she'd rediscovered the importance of being close to family. I spent 20 years proving I could be independent, she'd said during her last visit, watching Pike teach Raina to drive the farm truck. But when family was under attack, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was being here. The farm was secured beyond future challenges. Victoria Hartwell helped establish a proper trust protecting the property while ensuring it would pass to my children and grandchildren according to my actual wishes. The infrastructure development proceeded as planned, but now the Fairchild family would benefit from increased property values. Real healing happened in smaller moments. Pike reading bedtime stories to Raina, family dinners with actual conversation, Raina bringing friends around proud to introduce her grandfather and father, no longer carrying shame of family secrets. Grandpa, Raina called from the chessboard, Dad says you taught him this game. Will you show me the move you taught him? I joined them at the table, looking down at the familiar board with its endless possibilities. The most important thing about chess isn't learning fancy moves, I told her. It's learning to see the whole board and protect the pieces that matter most. Like family, she said. Exactly like family. Outside snow continued falling on Fairchild Farm, covering fields in pristine white promising renewal. Inside 3 generations sat around a chessboard, learning from each other, building trust, one move at a time. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is trust your family and know when not to. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize God works in mysterious ways. When my granddaughter grabbed my hand that day at the pharmacy, I thought my world was ending. But God had a different plan. He was giving me the chance to fight for what mattered most. If you're hearing this true story, and you're a grandfather or grandmother, facing family pressure about your independence, don't be like I was in the beginning. Don't ignore the warning signs when something feels wrong. Don't let shame or pride keep you from asking for help. I almost lost everything because I trusted blindly and acted too late. These grandpa stories we share aren't just entertainment, they're warnings and wisdom passed down through generations. My true story taught me that age doesn't make you helpless. Experience makes you stronger. When people try to convince you that you're too old to make your own decisions, remember that God gave you a lifetime of wisdom for a reason. The most important lesson from my grandpa, stories. Family loyalty is sacred, but blind trust can be dangerous. Don't sign documents you don't understand, no matter who brings them to you. Don't let anyone convince you that asking questions makes you difficult. Get a second opinion on major decisions, especially those involving your property or finances. I was fortunate to have Raina's courage and Serafina's legal expertise, but not everyone has a granddaughter brave enough to risk everything or a daughter who's a trial attorney. That's why you need to protect yourself before crisis strikes. Build relationships with people outside your immediate family. Friends like my Atticus professionals, you can trust community members who know your true character. Document everything, keep records. Stay informed about your own affairs. Don't let anyone isolate you from people who truly care about you. And if something feels wrong, if your gut tells you that family members are acting strangely, listen to that instinct. It might save your life. God blessed me with a second chance to rebuild my family and protect what 3 generations of Fairchilds had built. Pike learned that redemption is possible when you face your mistakes honestly. Raina learned that sometimes protecting the people you love requires incredible courage. And I learned that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless. It means having decades of experience to draw upon when facing life's greatest challenges. My true story proves that it's never too late to fight for what's right. These grandpa stories remind us that wisdom comes with age and that experience is our greatest weapon against those who would take advantage of us. Trust your instincts, they're your protection. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own family struggles, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced similar challenges with family trust and betrayal? Your story might help someone else. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring grandpa